All right, welcome everyone to the overview of reproductive coercion. This is part of Sexual Assault Awareness Month, hence the teal ribbons behind me as my Zoom background. The teal ribbon is for sexual assault awareness, so you might see that around a lot this month. My name is Alicia Johnson. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm the director of the Women's Center on the Oshkosh campus of UW Oshkosh, as well as the lead organizer for the intersection on the Fox Cities and Fond du Lac campuses. I am very pleased to have Molly Lancelot here from Planned Parenthood Advocates of Wisconsin, or Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin, as well as Marianne Radley with Planned Parenthood Advocates of Wisconsin. And so Molly's going to give us an overview of reproductive coercion, and Marianne's going to help us know how we can get involved in ensuring reproductive freedom. All right, Molly, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Alicia, and thank you for inviting us today. Do I have the power to share my screen? Ooh, okay. Never know how to do this without everybody having to watch me do it. Okay, there we go. Well, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us on this beautiful, sunny, and almost warm day. So especially if you are sitting inside watching this screen, I appreciate your time and effort today. We are going to talk about reproductive coercion and also what's going on in our state related to other reproductive access questions that people may have. So feel free to ask questions, put things in the chat. I'll ask Marianne and Alicia if you can watch the chat while I'm talking. I may not be able to see comments. So my name is Molly Lancelot. I'm a community education manager with Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin. I'm based in Milwaukee. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And this is a new topic that we don't get asked to talk about a lot. So it was exciting to get to put together materials, and hopefully this is what you want to know and everybody learns something. Please do chime in, ask questions, and feel free to participate in discussion. So we have a couple, do we have some learning objectives? I don't remember if I refined the learning objectives. Let's see what the learning objectives say. Oh, okay, yes, we're going to hopefully be able to explain who may be involved in different types of reproductive coercion throughout society. List at least 3 ways reproductive coercion can play out. Discuss how reproductive and sexual coercion are intimately connected with sexual and interpersonal violence, racism, and ableism. And then understand how federal abortion access would affect access to abortion in Wisconsin. So first, we wanted to introduce a little bit about Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin if you're not very familiar. We do have a mission to empower all individuals to manage their sexual and reproductive health through patient services, education, and advocacy. And as mentioned, I'm from the education team. Marianne is from the advocacy team, and we will represent and tell you about the patient services team. So first, a lot of us know us as a health provider, and we do offer health services throughout the state. These are the types of services and screenings that we offer to any person of any gender with any body parts. Primarily, we're known as sexual and reproductive health care, and that is our main area of expertise. We can do referrals for other types of health care someone may need. We recently started gender affirming care for patients that are 18 and over. So if somebody needs hormone therapy as a trans or non-binary person, that's possible at all of our health centers through telemedicine. And we do have 3 abortion care service centers, 1 in Madison, 1 in Milwaukee, and 1 in Sheboygan. Our health centers for services, we just like everyone to know you don't need an ID to book an appointment. If you are undocumented or a teenager without access to your federal documents, you don't need them. Youth can be anonymous if they need to be. They don't need their parents' permission to access most of our services, with the exception of abortion. we can talk about fine-tune laws if we need to on that. And we don't turn people away for inability to pay. We can offer payment plans, discounts, we can waive fees. We do take commercial insurance, public insurance like Badger Care and FPAS, and offer self-pay. So we do want to make sure that anybody can access reproductive and sexual health care regardless of how much money they have. We are funded through grants and other types of private funders. We do have some federal funding. There's a gag rule, Title 10 gag rule, which means that we have to be careful about where we talk about what, especially related to abortion. And we do have a couple of other services like PP Direct and Spot On that are apps and electronic services for people looking for information or for tools to help them with things like birth control. Here's the location of all of our Planned Parenthood health centers. We have 24 throughout the state. The color differentiation doesn't matter as much right now. That was a funding thing that a few years ago we lost Title 10 funding as a federal funding, and we're operating without it. So pretty much all of our health centers are self-sustaining at this point. And one last plug, April is Get Yourself Tested Month as well as Sexual Assault Awareness Month. So anyone who is interested in accessing testing can go in and get free testing for chlamydia, gonorrhea, trichomoniasis, and can get a HIV rapid test. Syphilis tests are free for those who fall into the screening categories. If it's necessary and you're at risk for syphilis, you can get that for free. We do encourage you to make an appointment by phone or online. The testing is free, but the treatment might cost or be billed to insurance or payment plans, etc. So there could be a cost attached, even if you're getting testing free. We just want to make sure everyone makes appointments, but throughout April, you can go ahead and visit your local Planned Parenthood Health Center for that. Okay, so moving on to reproductive coercion. This came into the spotlight more recently for most people in a way that maybe nobody had considered it before, with Britney Spears and a conservatorship she was under in control of her dad and some other folks who were able to make decisions for her and control her money. I don't know real specifics. I believe it was based on mental health concerns they had about her and her, needing to have that supervision. But in a statement she made to a judge, it was recorded. She said, "I have an IUD inside of myself right now so I don't get pregnant. I wanted to take the IUD out so that I could start trying to have another baby, but this so-called team won't let me go to the doctor to take it out because they don't want me to have any more children. So basically this conservatorship is doing me way more harm than good." And this is an example of reproductive coercion where one person has control over another person's reproduction and is not, taking into account what that individual wants, but is trying to control them in some way. Marianne, are you raising your hand?
You could figure out how to unmute. I don't know if you saw my text, Molly. As I was getting home, I saw that Britney Spears just this afternoon announced that she is pregnant. So a very timely update, as I knew this slide was in there. So good for Britney. I just wanted to insert.
Wow, she hasn't texted me and told me yet, so I hadn't heard.
I'm the first to know.
Okay. Oh, all right. That is timely. Oh yes, great. And also the Oshkosh Health Center is participating in GYT, so there's some free testing. All right. Or maybe that's all the time. Anyway, okay, so this has brought reproductive coercion and that term into our focus in a way that many people hadn't known. So we just want to clarify a few definitions because this does tie into intimate partner violence and sexual assault, as this is our awareness month, because often reproductive coercion might be something going on between partners. So here are some definitions, and I'm not going to read them all out loud, But for reproductive coercion, we have maintaining control and power over one partner related to reproductive health, such as tampering with birth control, etc. So it may not be as blatant as a thing as saying you can't get your IUD out. It could be, but there are other more sinister ways, not more sinister, but other ways that might be less obvious that someone may be coercing someone else. And then sexual coercion also plays in here, repeatedly pressuring a partner to have sex, threatening to end the relationship if the partner doesn't have sex, forced non-condom use, and intentionally exposing partners to STDs and HIV. And that definitely also falls into the sexual assault umbrella, as we'll see a lot of these categories overflow and have blurry lines between them. So first, let's talk about who can be involved. And I want you to either, you can unmute yourself and speak or type in the chat, and Marianne can tell me who could be involved in controlling or trying to manage the reproductive choices of other people.
Yep, we have someone that says partner and parents.
That was my guess. We get intimate partner and family or parents, for sure.
We also have a chat in that says church and unfortunately legislators.
Ooh, okay. Yeah, I definitely have politicians in there, so legislators would be accurate. Church is one that is interesting and I think is accurate. It's not one I had, to pop up here on the screen, but that's a good one to add. Anyone else?
Peers or just social norms?
Okay. I think there definitely is pressure to do things or not do things. I don't know how much really controlling or influencing could be going on, but I suppose it's possible. The other things I wanted to get at that I think are less obvious are legal guardians, which could be maybe people were thinking family or parents, especially if you are a person with disabilities or have mental health concerns. Legal guardians sometimes have a wide range of control over a person's life. Family of the partner, that could also be not only a person's family, but their partner's family may be involved. And then medical providers are one that we need to be concerned about and think about in terms of how they may be influencing reproductive choices or, highly encouraging in a way that is coercive towards certain choices that can happen in the medical world. Also, prison officials and medical personnel. There's a lot of things that go on in prisons and detention centers that are really scary and are happening now and not 40 or 50 years ago, but continue to happen in those places. And then politicians, we did say, legislature, and judges actually have been recorded offering this for that when it comes to controlling someone's reproduction. So that's the list of a bunch I could think of. I may ask if someone is comfortable where they said church. The next page I have like some examples and ways that some of these groups may be involved in coercing or controlling someone else's reproductive choices. I'm interested to hear more about how a church might be doing that. So think about that, and I may ask you to answer, but first I'll go with examples I have. So this is how some of these entities may reproductively coerce. Certainly partners might dictate or sabotage contraception. They may dictate pregnancy, insisting on against and be forcing someone to have an abortion. Parents and guardians, especially for people with disabilities or mental health issues, decisions around relationships, marriage, sex, and contraception can be made by parents and guardians without conversations with the individual, or for their own good, but maybe without recognizing that whether a person is disabled or mentally disabled, that doesn't mean they don't also have sexual urges and interests. Medical providers. So if a doctor or nurse is not involving a patient in contraceptive decisions and they are deciding what's best for the person so that the patient doesn't mess it up, this especially happens with younger patients, like teenagers, where, you know, a pediatrician or a provider may just say, I'm just going to put you on Depo because that's just easy. That's going to be easy for you. We won't worry about it. You're just going to get put on Depo. And that would be coercive. And there are other ways that medical providers can also be coercive. And we're going to talk a little more about that later. Legal coercion. So judges have been known to reduce sentences or offer to reduce sentences for long-term birth control. So I have an example here from 2017, which is not all that long ago, 5 years ago. A judge was offering a 30-day sentence credit if inmates agreed to a vasectomy or Nexplanon. So a vasectomy is a permanent surgical method of birth control for people with penises and testicles. And Nexplanon is the arm implant, which lasts 4 or 5 years, depending on who you talk to. And so while I believe that judge was told he couldn't do that and probably hopefully disciplined in some way, it was an idea that he had and he thought was appropriate to offer. And that was really an abuse of power and a coercion. In houses of detention, the access to abortion may be limited, or the cost of abortion can't be, you know, federal funding can't be used. So if it's a federal institution, how does an inmate get access to an abortion and be able to pay for it? And there is known forced sterilization and procedures without consent for people in detention centers. And then not only for people with criminal charges, but also for people who are in this country illegally and being detained for crossing borders, where we've heard of sterilization done without consent, being told it was one procedure and then it was another, or being done while somebody was giving birth. And so those kinds of consent were not gotten and weren't given in a way that the patient fully understood what they might be agreeing to. So that's definitely coercion. And finally, a broader way to look at it, if a person is on disability benefits through the federal government or Medicare benefits, if they get married, they can have their benefits lost or reduced. And so that's a big concern for people in the disability community around being able to live their lives and be in relationships, but also needing to support themselves and have medical care related to government benefits. Any thoughts about how maybe a church could be involved in reproductive coercion, or any of these examples you want to talk about a little bit? I'm going to let you think while I mute and blow my nose. Anything in the chat to report, Marianne?
Nothing in the chat, but you know, this one speaks to me too. I've spoken in presentations before how I went to 12 years of Catholic schools, and now I work for Planned Parenthood, which is not the track that I think most of us that grew up going through the Catholic school system ends up on. But in my experience, there definitely was, I mean, implied, like not even implied, but overt abstinence only, like education stuff that went on in like, you know, school assemblies, presentations. Yep. So in the chat, Sierra says mainly with children and underage pregnancy, for sure. So I remember, you know, one of the, like a counselor at my high school saying like, well, we don't see any pregnant girls at school. And someone may think that like, oh, that's because, you know, all of our students at this Catholic high school aren't having sex. But she's like thinking there's so much shame and stigma around sex before marriage in the Catholic, you know, church and Catholic schools that they may just be having secret abortions and, you know, hiding the fact that they're having sex. So I think there's just like kind of a lot of subtle and maybe not so subtle ways that being involved in the church controls your sexuality. Maybe it's not like they're explicitly telling you to do one thing or the other, but there's a culture and there's expectations.
Right. I've actually heard that same argument in schools like charter schools that kind of get to make their own rules and do what they will, that there aren't any pregnant students in the school because they expel them. And it's not because so they are sent to another school and or sent to, you know, a pregnant girls school so that they are not seen and recorded in statistics as, you know, something that goes on here. So yeah, I think there's a sending away of pregnant teenagers that still happens in some places. And you're right, while that does affect the individual who leaves and who is pregnant without their peer group, it definitely does also affect those who knew that person and realized now she's gone, what happened to her, what would happen to me. Yeah, so interesting discussion. And they, yes, they strongly suggest or force them to go get schooling somewhere else because it's not the image they want in their institution.
That was a few years ago. Planned Parenthood had an event when I was a volunteer. I couldn't tell you if it was 2017 or what year it was, but I went to an event, a fundraiser for Planned Parenthood, and the speaker was Ann Fessler, and she wrote the book, The Girls Who Went Away, I believe it was, and that took place, yep. I don't know if Molly, you were here at the time. I attended as a volunteer, but yeah, it was incredible. And it was about that very thing, about underage, you know, high school age girls that got pregnant. And the response to that from from their own families was sometimes abusive, and they went away to a school, had their babies taken. It was so traumatic.
Yeah, and that was,
yeah, Alicia said in the chat, there's layers
right.
Here.
That book specifically talks about pregnant girls, I think like in the 50s, but yeah. It absolutely, sometimes we like to think that this only happened, you know, 50 years ago or 70 years ago. This isn't who we are anymore, but it is happening, and perhaps more covertly in places where the culture can influence people differently. So nice. All right. I'm going to go to the next slide, which will focus a little more on partners involved in reproductive coercion. That is the category that I think the most research has been done on, and a little more information is known about the ways that one partner coercing another can play out. So some examples here of pregnancy coercion is threatening to end a relationship or harm a partner if they don't get pregnant, telling a partner not to use birth control. Birth control sabotage could be refusing to wear or removing a condom during sex, poking holes in condoms, throwing away birth control pills, interfering with partners' access to reproductive health services for contraceptive care. So it could be a couple of different things. And finally, abortion coercion could be interfering with a partner's ability to access abortion care, threatening to harm a partner or a baby if the partner does not get an abortion. So those are just a couple of examples. I don't know if anyone in the chat has any other examples they want to bring up. These were just some in some studies that I read.
I think I'll just pop on here, but I think one thing that I was thinking about was like the pressure to have children, and not necessarily from a partner, but maybe from parents or society. Thinking about myself here, and so like choosing to be child free, and having that like guilt of saying, oh, you know, like for my parents, like, oh, we want to have more grandchildren, or even with society, like some people would cite the population decline. And so I think there's a lot there too that might not be like overt coercion, but just that like social pressure and like to conform to norms.
Yeah, I think it's probably a hop, skip, and a jump from pressure to coercion, depending on the folks involved with it and the relationships that they have that might be verging on unhealthy things already. let me see what the next, we'll give some resources after this, because certainly all of these are examples of really unhealthy relationship behaviors that would be considered abusive. And so we want to make sure people have resources if this is something they've experienced or they're concerned about someone with. Also, these types of coercion are higher in groups of African American and Latinx women, and folks that have, as I've mentioned before, disabilities, lower incomes, things like that, that just puts them in a more vulnerable position and perhaps without resources. So we do have some more positive news. There are healthcare providers that are working to help people not be in these situations or to figure out if they're in these situations. So for example, if you've ever been a patient at Planned Parenthood, you should have experienced that the patient is always called into the room first privately. And if they came with a parent or a partner, that person is left in the waiting room, at least initially. And that's so that they can be screened for intimate partner violence and asked questions where they can speak honestly and freely. Even if they're a teenager, we want to make sure parents aren't unduly influencing, partners aren't forcing anyone. And if the patient wants the person who's with them to come back into the exam room with them, they can decide that privately, and then the staff can go get them out of the waiting room. If they decide they don't want them back there, then we just don't go get them, and we tell them, well, that's part of our policy, so don't worry about it. We wouldn't let you come back. So we don't have to make that be something that the patient has to explain to their partner. Then additionally, in abortion care, all consenting meetings are done privately, and they are repeated to make sure that a person is not feeling coerced or pressured by anyone in order to have an abortion if they don't want to. If they express any hesitation about the decision they're making, then as much conversation as needs to be had can go on. And even if more time needs to be taken to make those decisions, our abortion counselors are really adept at making sure people are freely making decisions and not feeling coerced to do that. And this includes parents who might come in and say, I want my child put on birth control. She's 14 and she needs to have a depot shot or an IUD because I don't want to worry about her getting pregnant. If the teenager there says, I don't want to be on that, I'm not sexually active, or I'm not, I don't want that in my body, we will not force that on a child. That's the individual's decision to make. And we can discuss with the parent and the children around making that decision, perhaps a different method of birth control that the child would be more amiable to or feel more comfortable with, or what is going on with the family and what sort of support do they need if the parents are so worried about this that they just want to force something upon their child in a way that wouldn't be healthy for them. So I'm looking at the chat. Okay. Oh, and yes, some of the threats include threatening to kill themselves if you get an abortion or you don't get one, if you don't do the thing that the partner is trying to pressure the other into. So this screening is really important, and it does go on by many health providers, but at Planned Parenthood, we especially make very sure that we do this every time, and with teenagers, so that they are being given whatever support they need. So we have just a broader definition that's kind of the opposite of reproductive coercion, which is reproductive autonomy. And this is the broader concept consisting of multiple domains of autonomous decision-making and empowerment with regards to reproductive health, including freedom from reproductive coercion, communication, and autonomy during decision-making. And I'm bringing this in because it is a transitional slide. This concept focuses on the ability to make decisions regarding reproductive health that may be impacted by multiple other forms of individual and systematic policies and pressures, including government coercion like forced sterilization, laws restricting fertility, or abortion. And so that's how we segue into our discussion around abortion care and the laws in our state and what may be changing in our country. And I'm going to turn it over to Marianne to discuss that. First, I'll let Marianne discuss our resources slide first.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you again for showing up today to hear our presentation this afternoon. So my name is Marianne Radley-Wellhouse. I am the Public Affairs Regional Coordinator in the Northeast region of the state. So I cover Oshkosh to Green Bay and Sheboygan, and I work out of my home in Appleton. I told Molly I would cover the resources slide quick because I'm familiar with them. I spent 12 years as a victim advocate at Reach Counseling. So this is an area that's near and dear to my heart and a great intersection of my two fields here. So, and Alicia and Sierra, if either of you want to expand on anything I have written on this slide here, it's very quick, but I did want to let folks who might not be aware of these resources to know that you have help and support in Oshkosh if you experience anything that resembles reproductive coercion, sexual assault, intimate partner violence, anything like that. So of course, UW Oshkosh has victim advocacy on campus. It looks like it can be accessed through the counseling center right now, through the phone number listed or emailing the email address I have listed, advocate@UWOSH. And Reach Counseling is available for 24-hour support as well by calling their hotline. They do in-person advocacy 24 hours a day at the hospital or at the police department, and can also help in filing police reports, going to court, providing one-on-one sessions, doing support groups, giving survivors access to therapy at the office. So those are your main resources for sexual assault related incidents in Oshkosh and Winnebago County. So if anyone, if Sierra or Alicia want to expand on that, I think I did a good nutshell. Oh, thank you. The Student Health Center at UWO is the other confidential resource on campus. Thank you, Alicia. Yes. And thanks. You can also file an anonymous report to the UWO victim advocate, is what I believe to be true as well. So if anyone needs these resources, please reach out. You will get great support. And thank you, Sierra. I appreciate that. All right, so, yes, thank you. I forgot I couldn't switch my slides. Molly's got control of that. So you may or may not know that right now in the state of Wisconsin and across the country, there is some scary stuff happening in the world of reproductive rights and particularly abortion access. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about what's going on nationwide, what that could mean for Wisconsin, and how you may be able to get involved or at least stay informed if you would like. So I just wanted to go over a little bit of what public affairs is. I have a team of about, I don't know, 12, 15 folks at Planned Parenthood. A handful of us are in the organizing team, and we work with our communities to build relationships with individuals, with volunteers, with partner organizations, with colleges and students, just to, grow our support and mobilize as many people as we can behind our cause, because like I said, times are looking a little rough for us right now in terms of reproductive care access. So the more people that we can garner that, feel strongly about the fact that we should all be able to access this care with as few and no limitations and no restrictions is great. So our current policy work is in abortion access in Wisconsin, what a post Roe v. Wade world could look like. I'll talk a little bit more about what that means, and election work. So we just, endorsed some candidates for the April election. We sent out a bunch of texts reminding people to vote. So we really try to, give our community the resources and information they need to have good election turnouts too, and make sure that we are advocating on behalf of pro-Planned Parenthood politicians. Different ways that you can help is to testify in front of the legislature, of course, to get out and vote. advocate for those you serve, and understand, that might not be one that that might be specific to something else, but anyway. So you can see in the little graphic there too, kind of what Planned Parenthood public affairs all entails. Molly, if you want to go ahead and move forward. So Roe v. Wade was a landmark case decision that the Supreme Court heard in 1973, and it recognized the right to safe and legal abortions. Before we had Roe v. Wade, abortion was legal for certain circumstances in 20 of our 50 states and illegal in 30 of them. In 1965, illegal abortion caused 1/6 of all pregnancy-related deaths. That's huge. And that is the last thing we want to see happen today. Today, abortion truly is one of the safest medical procedures. When we have access to safe legal abortion, there's complications less than 1% of the time. And 73%, so like 3/4 of Americans oppose overturning Roe. If it were to be overturned this summer, over 25 million people would lose access to abortion care. So if you want to move ahead one more. There. So the reason we're talking about this summer, back in December, the United States Supreme Court heard a case called Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health. And the fact that the Supreme Court even decided that they would hear this case is monumental in and of itself. They get requests to hear thousands upon thousands of cases each year and only have the capacity to hear maybe like 100, right? So the fact that they were like, yes, this one that involves abortion is something we want to look into is indicative of the balance or the imbalance of the Supreme Court now. It leans very heavily to the right. And so this is what's at stake. If and when they release their decision later this year, it could be, we're thinking probably toward the end of June, but really it could be any time, depending on how the Supreme Court decides in this Jackson Women's Health case. Roe v. Wade could be chipped away at or completely dismantled. And so what that means is, well, it means different things for different states, okay? So right now, Wisconsin is one of 9 states in the country with a criminal abortion statute still in place. So we have an old law from 1848 or something like that, that the only reason this law is not in effect is because of Roe v. Wade. Roe v. Wade supersedes this state bill that criminalizes abortion. And if Roe goes away, so does safe and legal abortion in Wisconsin, okay? It would be immediately criminal, it would be immediately illegal, and Planned Parenthood would no longer provide this service for Wisconsinites. So under this 172-year-old law in Wisconsin, it criminalizes abortion. Doctors and healthcare professionals, even Uber drivers that would assist someone in obtaining an abortion, they'd be guilty of committing a felony. So it's not unlike what we are seeing happening in Texas and Ohio, and I think Idaho, and across the state, a lot of folks are trying to already put these massive, massive restrictions in place. So the image I have on the screen here is candidate for governor this year, Rebecca Clayfish. She has gone on record saying that she would be happy to sign into law some of these very, very restrictive abortion bans, not unlike what just took place in Texas. You can go ahead and move on. Oh, is that it? I thought I had more. All right. Well, we have time for discussion. We have time for discussion. So there are plenty of opportunities to get involved. Actually, one thing I do want to talk about, if you want to just bounce back so the slide is on topic. I want to talk about the fact that abortion is still legal in Wisconsin. However, just because it's legal doesn't mean it's accessible to everybody, right? So under our previous administration, when Scott Walker was governor, he signed a ton of anti-reproductive health measures into law. There were attempts to defund Planned Parenthood, and Wisconsin has some of the strictest abortion restrictions in the country. We have a 20-week ban and an unnecessary 24-hour waiting period. There's virtually no other a medical procedure that requires someone to just go home and think about it, right? Like when people have made the decision to have an abortion, they've made their decision, and we need to trust that folks coming in for this procedure know what's best for them and for their families. So, you know, think about the person that lives up in Minocqua, hours and hours from Minnesota, or from an abortion, a center that provides abortion care in Wisconsin. They now have to take off work, find childcare for the kids they already have, book a hotel room, drive 4 hours. These are all restrictions that have been intentionally placed to make abortion less and less accessible. It's extraordinarily expensive and time consuming now with the you know, need to travel, because our 2 clinics that provide surgical abortion care are in Milwaukee and Madison. That's really far away from a lot of the state of Wisconsin. Sheboygan offers medication, which is great, but some people are past that point where they can access medication. They might be 11 weeks or beyond. So just because it's safe and legal doesn't mean it's accessible to everyone. It just really depends on your life, on what's going on in your life. So ways to get involved. Yes, there are plenty. So first and foremost, if folks want to just stay in touch, you can email me and get on our email list. We send out, I would say weekly, maybe a couple times a month emails. And right now we've got a ton of events happening. We want to make sure that people know what's going on, what the threats are in Wisconsin, and you know, that you can just stay engaged with us if you want. My email address is on this slide here, and truly send me an email if you'd like me to just add you to our email list. We have a lot going on, a lot of tabling, a lot of really fun events meant to just get the word out about what's happening. And if you're a part of any student groups, if you have community groups, if you have anything you want to invite us to come to and just like say, hey, this is what's happening right now, and this is how you can get involved, you know, please don't hesitate to just send me an email and have a conversation with how we can do that. Let's see, relational organizing is one thing we do a lot. We have trainings that are Relational Organizing 101, and that is essentially just how can you engage the folks that you already know to, you know, garner support for Planned Parenthood and the issues that we're fighting for right now. So there's training opportunities all the time. There's opportunities to get involved with us all the time, or at the very least stay in touch through our email list. So I think that is everything I have for today. If there's anyone that has any questions, wants to drop them in the chat or come off mute, please feel free. You know, we've just thrown a lot of information out at you, and I would love to hear if anyone has anything to say.
Thank you all so much. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording so we can enter the discussion phase.